invest in personal development, you'll be able to see that something starts changing in you. When you go through an experience, you go get a new job, it's not really about the pay. It's about the service that you can give.
You find yourself working and surrounded by some of the world's greatest minds. What do you do with such an opportunity? In this episode, Dr. Chola Milambo, the permanent representative of Zambia to the UN in New York, shares exactly how he pivoted to greatness when he found that opportunity.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction and welcome to this program. My name is Chola Milambo. I am Zambia's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, so I'm in diplomacy, and I'm working under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Grew up in Lusaka, here in Zambia, in Lusaka West to be precise, in a family of 7 brothers and 1 sister, father, mother. Very, very active family scenario. I'm a farm boy. My influence is from the family that I grew up in, a very Christian family. My mother is very SDA, comes from an SDA family. My father comes from historically an SDA family. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather was one of the pioneers that crossed the Zambezi River from then southern Rhodesia into northern Rhodesia as one of the first pioneers in 1902. As an SDA missionary, so to say. And so I've been influenced through that process within the family. But at the same time, having grown up, also spent some years in the UK, my early years from the age of 4 until about 8, 9. That also has an impact on one's value system growing up. So it's a mix of domestic values and external values as one grows up. As you move on to secondary school life, I was at Kafia Boys Secondary School. It's a boarding school, it's a boys' school, and so you learn the skill to survive on your own, how to make good friends, how to network, how to focus on your school. And I think those are some of the issues that really influenced my life. Getting into university, you continue to get influenced by your experiences. As you know, your current position usually is a reflection of your different experiences across life, what you have heard, what you have experienced, what you have read. So in my case, I came across very interesting people, of course, at the university. Even during my master's program, very interesting people. Many of the people I met during the university now, those who are quite influential in Zambia's society right now. So sometimes you can actually see the value of what someone is going to be very early on in life. And if you're able to pick the right friends, which is a very important part, you're able to at least pick the right values in life. Very good question. Maybe let me step back first. Let's give you a broader picture of the journey to where I am right now. Firstly, you would have to point out that as an economist at the University of Zambia, you tend to have a certain outlook of what your professional life is going to be. It doesn't always work out that way. I went to university in the 90s. In the early 90s, graduated 1998. And the economy was quite different then. Prospects for students who are graduating at that time was quite different. The economy was growing. We're going through a process of liberalization. So our professional lives, many of us who are economists, are reflective of what the country is actually going through at the very same time. And like I said, we had a certain trajectory. We expected to go into a master's program. I went for a master's in Nairobi, spent 2 years in Kenya, and then came back to Zambia. I worked for ZRA. As a matter of fact, if you really go back, I started working in ZRA from '94, and even before it became ZRA, it was called the Department of Taxes, and I worked there as a clerk at the age of 18 years old. And so that was a long, long time ago under Minister of Finance. And so coming back from Nairobi, I get back into Lusaka, back to ZRA, and then from ZRA I transitioned to the Central Bank, Bank of Zambia, where I worked from 2002 until I left for my PhD, more or less, in 2006. Rough road, of course. Went to the US as a Fulbrighter. Again, learned many lessons. One of the issues of, to your question, the point where you expect to go in one direction and things head in another direction. My key target when I got to the university where I did my PhD is Howard University in Washington, D.C. The key selection, the point of selection for picking Howard University in Washington was because I wanted to work at IMF World Bank, to be more precise, at the IMF. I'd gone to Washington in 2005 under the central bank's umbrella, and the place resonated with me. I could see myself working at the IMF. I could see myself walking those corridors, walking in the streets of Washington. If you're a central banker, IMF is like the right place to, it really aligns. And so over the space of 1 year, I tried to get a scholarship, got a scholarship with the Fulbright, under the Fulbright program, got into Howard, did my time there. Immediately I got there, I applied for what they call the Junior Professionals Program under the IMF. And there's an age limit of 32, beyond which you don't qualify. And so much of my energies were targeted towards entering that institution. I went through the several interviews, first, second, third interview thereabout, because they have a staggered phase of going in. And I didn't get through the first time. I didn't go through the second. Third time was much more elaborate, and I did not go through. And it was at a point where I was trying to finalize my PhD thesis, and I realized that, okay, fine, now I think it's time to really, really go home now. And so packed up my bags and came back to Zambia. Worked for a year and a half, and fortunately, I had an opportunity to be selected to work at the World Bank. And I worked under the office of the Executive Director for Africa Group 1. It's a complex name, but it's a constituency. Basically, Zambia is a shareholder of the World Bank. And we fall under various groupings at the board. So I was working at the board as an advisor. Fantastic opportunity. I was able to transition my career from a central banker into more or less a development expert, having transitioned from a tax man into a central banker. And so, very good experience there. One would say that if I had not gone through that hiccup with the IMF interview, I probably wouldn't have ended up within the World Bank. And really, if you look even further down the road, after working at the World Bank for about 9 years, from 2012 until about 2011, 2012, I crossed over into the IMF finally. And I worked at the IMF for about 9 months, 2022, 9 months. And then I was asked to take on this particular role. Now, if you look back, you find that sometimes what would be a misstep is actually a stepping stone to where you actually need to go. And so the so-called failure of my inability to get to the IMF that time transitioned me into getting back into the IMF and then getting this assignment. Very important question. It comes down to having the right principle around work and life, how the two things come together. Basically, you are both a parent at home and you're also a worker at your office place. And the idea is to keep home at home and keep work at work. Do not blend the two as much as possible. You can talk about work at home, but you don't bring your work necessarily at home. You can talk about home at work, but really don't bring all your home issues into the office. I mean, in the work environment, your employer just wants to see your output. They're not necessarily interested in what's going on at your house. I mean, it's probably part of how you help to bring workers together to have some form of balance. But generally, in a work environment, you're going to discuss your issues around work. Productivity is one of the key issues. So basically, don't be a mother at the office and don't be a boss at home. Those are two different roles. We are fathers, we are mothers, we are uncles, but at the same time, we have our responsibilities in our respective areas. So it's important that you have those separate. Also, when it comes to the work-life balance, ensure that the time that you have for family remains intact. Do not be getting phone calls at the dinner table when you're with the family. Similarly, at the office time, when it's time for you to be in a staff meeting, don't be disturbed by what has to be done at home. So try and separate the two things. I tell my staff that the time that they have at the office should be devoted to office work. And that we as an office will not call you, will try not to call you during home hours. And we only call you unless it's absolutely critical. And therefore, when your phone rings from the office and you're at home with family, just know that it's a call that you must take. So there's that distinction that becomes very important. So it comes down to the principle. Thank you very much. The issue of Fulbright scholar is very important. Like I'd mentioned earlier on, I had this ambition to be in Washington to study economics. I studied economics. I got 3 degrees in economics from undergrad, master's, and PhD. And so to get to that PhD, to get to Washington, I needed to find a scholarship. And it so happened that when I was at the central bank in 2005, my colleague had just left from the same office, had just left on a similar scholarship. It's a Herbert Humphrey scholarship, much shorter, structured a bit differently, to Boston. And so came the Fulbright opportunity. And interesting enough, I felt that I wasn't ready at that particular time. And so I started encouraging other friends to apply and checking with them. So others were not interested. I was more interested in leaving after 5 years at the central bank, because I think generally when you do 5 years at everything, you have a chance of being called an expert. And so my target was from 2002 to 2007. I should do 5 years continuous central banking, then thereafter go for a PhD. But the opportunity came a year earlier, 4 years. And so I was trying to sell it to other people until my wife said, no, why don't you apply? I said, reluctantly, so I applied. And it turned out that it came through after a very competitive process. From 150, I think we were at the beginning. Then they cut it down to about 10 people. From 10, 5. From those 5, they picked 2 people. So I was one of the 2 people that were picked. But I think, for me, it came down to having clarity on what you want. I was very clear about what I really wanted from my PhD. I was very clear about what I truly believe in. And I think the key interview that I had during the screening process helped to say, look, I want to make a difference for my country, and I think I can get through if I work hard, I pray, I'll really get through. And so I think that it resonated with what they were looking for. The Fulbright program is very important for Zambia. It's important for the US as well. It's what they call soft diplomacy. Basically, you invest upstream in friendships. Like Zambia and the US have a good relationship, partly because many of the leaders that we have in this country, some of them have gone through have learned in the US. And even Zambia, similarly, as we're taking on students from different countries, many of these students will go and become influential people in their various countries. And that way you create this strong bond between countries because they understand our culture, they understand how we think and what our values are. Similarly, for the Fulbright program, it's a similar thing. Having gone through a Fulbright scholarship, one appreciates the US culture, how they look at life, how they look at the world, and that we're able to bridge these two worlds. So to get admitted to the program, one has to first finish the first degree. That's the basic one. Two, you'd have to go on the website of the Fulbright website, see what the qualifications are. You have to be very clear about what field you want to be in. You have to be very clear about what area of the US you probably want to settle down in. You have to go through the preliminary tests. If you're going for an MBA, of course, there's the preliminary test for that one. There's also the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language. That's what you go through for, everybody goes through that. And so you go through those little exams. But I think it just helps to be true to who you are. Seek to serve the country, because they are looking for people who are going to gain skills from the US, then come back to Zambia to serve at least for 2 years, to pay back to the country. I think that's a core component of it. So I think at this point in time, we're happy to talk about the United Nations and the role of Zambia, the role of the permanent mission of Zambia to the United Nations. It plays a very, very important role in the broad architecture of our foreign policy. The permanent mission represents the interests of Zambia at the UN, especially in the governance structures of the UN, meaning that our office represents the interests of Zambia at the General Assembly, in the structures of the UN, including, say, ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council. We represent Zambia in the various committees, the 6 committees at the UN in the General Assembly. We represent the interests there. We also represent the country when it comes to advancing our interest in peacekeeping. That's a very important component of Zambia's foreign policy. Now, more broadly, I must say that Zambia's foreign policy is anchored on economic diplomacy. What does that mean? It means that our international relations must seek to enhance our investments, must seek to advance the financing opportunities that are there for the country. It must seek to enhance our exports, and so on and so forth. In the context of the United Nations, it's a bit different in the sense that you'd have to define economic diplomacy in the context of how Zambia relates with the United Nations, meaning that on a multilateral stage, our arguments are a bit different. We're looking at how we can advance sustainable development, how we can advance economic cooperation between countries. And so our arguments around economic diplomacy are a bit different at a multilateral level than they are at a bilateral level, so to say. That said, the permanent mission represents the country. When you see the president come to New York, for instance, in September to give the general address, we as an office are the ones who facilitate that engagement. We also host various delegations who come throughout the year. We have several conferences that start in January and run all the way until just before September. We have conferences that take place afterwards. We're engaged in COP, which is the for the COP29 this year under the environmental framework. And so there are many things that we do. I don't think there's enough time to really even go through everything that we do. But suffice to say, we represent the interests of the country. I think it would be nice to put it this way, that the office in New York represents Zambians at the UN in the governance structures. And we carry a voice when it comes to the issues that need to be discussed in the various negotiations. The General Assembly, for those who are a bit familiar with the General Assembly is like Parliament, and each country has a seat, and each country has one vote, and all the votes are of equal weight. And we debate on matters and pass resolutions that influence the global world. Plain language, complicated but plain. Very good question. I think it's actually much broader than just transitioning. I think it comes down to a transformation. And I'll take you back to the time I was at the World Bank, and we had a situation where the office was transitioning. There was a crop of older advisors who were leaving the office, and a crop of young advisors who were, as party of, taking over. And it so happened that during that transition time, it became very clear that the office was going through some operational challenges in terms of capacitation. So a lot of institutional memory left the office, and we who remained as the new senior advisors were trying to tutor those who had just come in, and things did not go very, very well. And it relates to the issue of failure that you talked about. And we decided to take everybody out into a retreat to say, look, we're going to look at how do you enhance operational efficiency under an environment of transition. I was tasked to give a talk on office optimization. How do you do more work within the time that you have with the similar resources? And my research into office optimization opened several doors. Firstly, I think I stumbled across, I love YouTube, so I like to watch YouTube. I stumbled across discussions and talks by a gentleman called Jim Rohn, who was an expert in personal development. And that really began the transformation process, because the issue of personal development really should stand at the heart of every professional. Because what you're trying to do is say, how can you bring forward the best version of myself? And that requires that you look at yourself, you take a stock take, you look at your mind, you look at your body, you look at your soul, and see how each one of those can be optimized, and they're interrelated. And so, we went through the retreat quite fine, but I remained influenced by, and inspired by the work by many others. And I came to the realization that in order for you to be successful, you have to study success. And so I started this journey, looking at, okay, fine, how did the Rockefellers of this world become successful? One of my favorites is Andrew Carnegie. How did he become a multi-billionaire and then give away all his wealth? I started reading books. I realized actually that success lies in having core values, having the right values, right principles, reading the right books, going through the right practices, building your knowledge. So it's all different components of personal development. And I can give a long discussion on personal development. But that in itself helped me to say, look, I can actually germinate from the soil that I'm in and flourish, all right? Because there's one interesting story you hear in the world of personal development of the field of diamonds. I think that's what the story is called, about a gentleman who was a farmer and that discovered diamonds in a different place. I think it was in Kimberley in South Africa. And he sold his farm to go join the gold rush, diamond rush. Wasn't very successful. Came back to his hometown and found that there was a mining enterprise on his own farm. Why? That found diamonds right under his feet. So all along he had been mining, he had been farming in a place which ordinarily had the keys to his own success. That said, so I said, okay, fine. I'm sitting in the World Bank here, and really when you walk through the corridors of the World Bank, some of the names you see on the doors are quite similar to walking through a library, because many of these folks have written books, written papers. And so I went on a journey to interview a few people. I'd walk into the office of the vice president for a particular section, interview them, find out what makes you tick. And interestingly, some of the answers were quite similar. Have your goals straight, stay focused, have a game plan, speak truth to power, just be structured and so on and so forth. There are many issues that come with success. And so that in itself began a transformation within my own self. My dress code changed, my diet changed, my work ethic changed. I started working out, and so I moved from the chubby me to a much slimmer me. I'm still a bit chubby, but we continue to, it's a work in progress. But the point is that a transformation took place. And if you invest in yourself, you invest in personal development, you'll be able to see that something starts changing in you. When you go through an experience, you go get a new job, it's not really about the pay. It's about the service that you can give. Do your job well and the money will follow later. Such key principles. You find those principles in books like Richest Man in Babylon, The Value of Work, what it does for you, what you become by going through a process and experience. So those were the seeds, and it's a long answer to a very short question, but that was where it all started from. And because I had now got into a situation where I'd made my goals very clear and started working on them, the transformation started showing in the output that I had. I began to carry myself differently. I became more assertive, as most Zambians were more withdrawn. But in an international setting, sometimes you have to be a bit more assertive. And that in itself creates a presence. And fortunately, when the administration was looking for someone who could advance economic diplomacy at the UN, they called me because, one, my assertiveness and the transformation had taken me from the World Bank to the IMF, and I had experience in more than one international organization, and I think it aligned with their view to see someone who can advance economic diplomacy at the United Nations in New York. So it's a transformation process. It's a question of, can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, where do I want to go? How do I get there? Am I willing to take the steps to move from here to there? How can I sharpen myself? What skills do I need? etc. And everything else comes together. Yes, so 2022, we moved to New York from Washington. The first surprise is that you'd think that Washington and New York are quite similar. They're very different. They're very different. New York City has got a buzz to it. It's always hopping, very busy. Washington, D.C. is much more laid back, open space. So just the environment is very different. What I liked about it was that there's so much energy in New York. New York is a high energy place. People there are always willing to engage, make contacts, network. It is the currency of New York. Everybody's hustling to make a living there. So exchanging business cards, making contacts is the name of the game. In the diplomacy circles, one thing that is also was a pleasure was just meeting people from various countries. I've got friends from Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan to Paraguay. We have people we know from Australia all the way to Nepal, Kathmandu. I mean, it's 193 countries, all represented within this block, 10, 20 blocks of New York City, the east side of Manhattan. We have 3 observer countries as well, states, so to say. And so you have an event happening every other day, whether it's a national event, whether it's a celebration of something, commemoration of this and that. The UN is a very interesting place. It's like a university, more or less, because you're always learning something new. There are 3 pillars to the UN. There's the peace and security, there's sustainable development, and there's human rights. And so really, wherever your interests lie, you'll find some space in there. And so there's going to be a discussion, there's going to be a lunch event, there'll be a breakfast event, there'll be an evening event. It's a very, very busy place. But just the quality of the people there, you have a mixture of professions. I'm an economist, others are truly coming from diplomacy, others are coming from the more political side. So it's a blend of different people with various experiences and cultures. So it's been quite a very interesting experience at the UN. The average day is, I don't think you have enough time for that question. The New York station is extremely busy. We are small staff and everybody's very busy. In my day starts with, of course, early in the morning, take a morning walk with my wife, get back, go through a little exercise maybe. But usually when I just close the door in the car, I start working. Either I'm checking my emails from the previous day, I'm checking emails from the early morning, I'm seeing what is coming in from the capital. We're 6 hours behind Lusaka. Or generally we're pushing for private sector investment, because sitting in New York, which is the financial capital of the world, is a great opportunity for Zambia to attract investment. And Zambia has a good name out there. And so there are a lot of people who are interested in saying, okay, fine, I want to invest in Africa. I want to invest in a stable environment. Zambia comes up. How do I get in? The big question that is there is how do you get in? And so I have these Zoom calls talking to various investors. It takes about an hour's drive from the official residence to the Chancery. And during that time, I'm usually checking emails or having a meeting between there. Get to the office around 9, and then now the work starts. Now everything goes according to the calendar. If an agenda is not on the calendar, it's not happening for the ambassador, basically. So the calendar is the biggest issue. Every morning, every evening, we discuss the calendar with my PA to make sure everything's on point, because there are a lot of demands. Now, a regular day can involve staff meeting in the morning to see what is coming up, what resolutions are coming up, which delegations are on the way. Do we have a program to deal with the events that are coming up? Then at 10 o'clock, the UN opens. We have several meetings, over 15 meetings will be taking place. You have to have your staff in the right place. I have to be prepared to look at my talking points before I go to the UN. Sometimes I'll be chairing a session in the General Assembly. And so, I have to be ready for what topic is coming up, how we'll handle the votes that are coming forward. At the same time, we have negotiations that are taking place in different areas. Currently, as Zambia, we are co-chairing a process on what is called the Global Digital Compact. The Global Digital Compact is an agreement among states on how we shall advance digital cooperation, including artificial intelligence. So that in itself is very demanding. We have to engage with many countries. We have to engage bilaterally, multilaterally, so there'll be meetings. By lunchtime, I would have dealt with several meetings. I'd be going for a lunch engagement, maybe with another ambassador or a representative of the UN, or there would be a side event which we are probably hosting or co-sponsoring. So the lunch is usually taken up. You get back to the office and then you find that your inbox is full. And so you have to clear all the issues in the inbox, and the inbox will have letters going to the capital here in Lusaka. Some of them are administrative, some of them are policy. And so I like to structure that. I deal with administrative issues first, HR, procurement, and all those other issues, accounts, finances. And then I deal with the policy issues because, it's hard to have one brain for both sides at the same time. Then I deal with the policy issues. And the policy issues range from a country wants to fly over Zambia and needs clearances. We have to inform the authorities here. It could be a candidate that we have as Zambia, and we want to exchange in a bilateral relationship, a reciprocal agreement, as they call it. So it's not verbal. It could be correspondence with the Secretary General's office or any other office at the UN. It could be a report coming out of the Security Council. Those are complex because they deal with peace and security issues which are very sensitive, whether it's Israel, Palestine, whether it's an issue in DRC next door or Central African Republic. And so we have to deal with the key policy issues in that space. At the same time, I have to prepare myself for the 3 o'clock because the UN opens again at 3 o'clock for various meetings. So it's several engagements. In the evening, maybe there'll be a dinner that is to be attended by myself or with myself and my wife. That's also part of the diplomacy, to be 6, 7 people at a table where we discuss probably an event that's coming up. So it's meetings, it's reading documents, it's making decisions, it's giving instructions to staff, it's receiving delegates, because once in a while Zambians will come through the office. We're always happy to receive our Zambians in the mission, and we encourage every Zambian who's in New York to really pass through the Chancery, because that is your office. Your taxpayer money is funding the office, and so it's good you come through, pay courtesy call on us. We're always happy to receive you. Or we could have other visitors coming from other missions, other institutions coming to pay courtesy call on the ambassador. So that is a typical day. A typical week can even get a bit more complicated because sometimes in there's travel. Sometimes in there's a major event. Sometimes we get big delegations sometimes coming to New York, some of them from civil society. So it's a really busy time. Always busy. There are only 2 gears at the UN mission. Very busy and extremely busy. And you have to be able to handle those issues. Which brings me to, I think, a certain component of your questions. What skills are required to run an office like that? The first one is that you need good organizational skills, because you need to be able to handle the volume of information that is coming towards you. You need to have good leadership skills, because you need to lead the team in its various components, whether it's the legal desk, whether it is the peace and security desk, the economic desk, accounts. All those pieces need to fit in together. Everybody needs to know what the other person is doing. So you need to have a corporate strategy, even at the mission level. So you need to have also a good memory to say, okay, fine, this is what we did last time. This is how I want to treat it this time. Good interpersonal skills, because you are the face of the country in New York. And so you have to be able to be relatable across the various cultures and different persons and people that you meet at the UN. So it requires various skills. Diplomacy is a very important skill, because it brings countries together and prevents wars. Yeah, raising Zambians abroad is a question that many people in the diaspora face. And I think sometimes there's confusion as to whether these children are American or they are Zambian. The answer is really the children are global. It's a different generation now. We are raising global citizens with a particular bias. They have bias towards their home country, whether that home country is Zambia or it's the US. You need to have a blend of those things. And so in our household, we have a blend of, okay, we're in the US, but at the same time, in our house is Zambia. You literally keep left when you're driving in our house. But the point is that we try to ensure that they are familiar with the culture. The way we instruct our children in the house is Zambian. They may have engagements with their colleagues outside which may influence them, but fundamentally they're Zambian children. There is, and I'm talking as a diaspora now, it's important that we teach the children the fundamentals of being a Zambian, what the flag means, our Independence Day, our presidents, our national heritage, what we have in Zambia, the richness of the culture. All those things need to be taught to the children, but also they need to experience it. And so every now and then we come down with the family, they experience the life here, and then we go back. So it's gonna be a blend of both domestic and foreign. And therefore, in that sense, they have to think globally. And I think it's also important to expose our children as much as possible. If you really think back as a child and try and remember what you got as a present when you were 9 years old, you may remember it, but you're more likely to remember an experience that you had, that you went to Livingstone, or you went to visit your relative in Kasama, than you will. But so that experiences matter, and that exposure is very important. The reality of life is that it won't always go according to the plan. Life has random twists and turns. And so one has to always be flexible, ready to change. As much as possible, when some things change dramatically, try not to panic. Try and keep a cool head and check your fundamentals. If there's a shock to your life or to your system, you have to see whether, okay, fine, do the fundamentals still remain the same? Should I still focus on the goals that I had sought out to pursue? If not, how do I change? Because the environment has changed. But now if your goals have not changed, but the environment has changed, your methodology has to change, and your path may have to change. But if it comes down to changing your goals, that's much more complicated. So being flexible, being able to respond to the changes that are taking place is a very important strength to it. In our work, we've had a few changes. For instance, my transition from within the World Bank, from the board, I worked as regular staff. That came to me as a bit of a shock, because I was expecting to run through my whole 7-year term in the executive director's office, but we had a sudden change in the setup, and I had to leave. And that really brought me to a point where I said, okay, fine, what am I pursuing here? Do I need to really change gears and change my goals? And that way we decided to say, okay, fine, we'll continue within the World Bank, we'll stay within the US, and perhaps we can still attain our goal of spending 7 years within this international organization, which allowed us to transition into the IMF and therefore to the UN, where we are. Yes, a very good question there. Personally, my aspiration for Zambia is that, of course, Zambia prospers, comes to its true form, that the potential that the country has comes forth. We have a great asset in our people, and through programs like this, we're able to showcase who we are as Zambians, what we carry, what we bring forward to the table. I think the Zambian song is yet to be fully sung. We need to have more exposure. We need to have more impact on the world. That's really my personal aspirations for the country. And in my role, I make every effort to bring out the opportunities that are there for Zambians to be on a particular stage. We had, every year we have elections at the United Nations, and we have candidacies, both at the country level and at the individual level. And during the past 2 years that I've served, I've been really keen to be on the lookout that we bring forward Zambians who have a very strong caliber, so that we can compete on the world stage. We have several Zambians who have had a lot of experience inside the country, bring a lot of value, even just from the experiences in Zambia. And I think on the world stage, we can actually make a mark. Very important. But how do you become a candidate? I think the first thing is to, it goes back to the issue that I talked about when it comes to personal development. I think you have to first be yourself. Now, to be yourself in your true form, you have to first find yourself, to ask yourself who you are, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what do I bring forward, what can I sharpen, what can I improve, and then you work on that component. When you are going through that process, you will see a difference in your professional life, and you bring yourself forward. Because in most cases, your work will speak for you. And in my case, when I was looking around trying to transition from one job to another, and I would talk to different people, they'd say, no, actually, we've heard of your work. And so it's nice to sit down with you and see what you can bring. And so to work hard, to have the right brand to yourself, have a strategy to get yourself exposed. In the case of having to represent Zambia in some form of capacity on these international bodies, whether it's a committee, whether it's advisory body, you have to get your work out there. You also have to have a relationship with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation to say, look, this is what I can bring. If you see an opportunity out there, present it to the ministry, and they'll look at your case and see whether indeed they can stand behind you. In diplomacy, having the endorsement of government is a major, major advantage when you're going to present yourself on an international body. So those are just some of the things that creates an alignment between my personal aspirations for the country and my role at the UN. For me, it's a service. I'm not doing this because I'm in pursuit of any finances. Rather, it's work, and it's a service. And I always tell my staff that come to the office to serve, meaning that you do not necessarily clock out until the job is done. You know, get the job done, and you'd have done your part in life. In life, the key issue, if I could just conclude with this, a key issue in life, according to what I think, is how you make a difference in other people's life. You know, if you're looking for a purpose in life, at least hang on to that if you haven't found anything yet. But it's about how you make a difference in other people's lives, and have you found your true calling, and you stick to that, and you don't retire from it, because you don't retire from what is your true calling.